Today we have an occasional meeting with our host Yuri Gimmelfarb and his guest. Good day, good day. Today's guest is historian, scholar, academician of the Russian Academy of Arts and Sciences, author of several monographs on the Napoleonic Wars, political scientist and theater director, member of the Independent Human Rights Council Russia, Evgeny Ponasenkov. Good day. Good day, Tavarishi. But after such an introduction, I'll definitely need a red carpet, although I'm not sure if I should come down on foot or in a wooden box. Evgeny, I didn't even list all of your regalia. Well, let's get straight to business. What are you concerned about? What concerns the U.S.? Remember as in Soviet times that there were news anchors like Bovin and company? Soviet propagandists who constantly tried to figure out why in the Soviet Union everything was great at a time when it was coming to an end, and why in the U.S. everything was rotting away. Remember the phrase, "Never have the streets of New York been so dimly lit." And how do the citizens of the United States live? Well, how they live, I don't know, but we as two Russian citizens... Isn't it a shame a white plantation owner expelled an African American from his house? It's unheard of. Unheard of, I agree, but as two Russian citizens, you and me can't not discuss our president, Donald Trump. Ours? Yes, of course he's ours. So, what do you think of, You know how many people are offended by what I say? In the Russian segment of Facebook, it's marvelous how Russians know wondrous words like segment. So in the Russian segment of Facebook, I wrote a lighthearted, ironic phrase in the spirit of Bernard Shaw. I said that Melania looks more like, or more fits, the role of First Lady, more than the previous cow. So I wrote this phrase, and so what? A free man in a free country has the right, right? How everybody began to attack me, my lord! You racist, you sexist, God knows what! To what degree have the leftists compromised the situation? It's totalitarianism. You can't say a single word. If there's no freedom of speech, it's totalitarianism. So, what else concerns the U.S. except for protection of cows? Okay, let's be more serious. What do you think of Donald Trump's first 2 weeks as president? It's all very serious. You think it's not, but aesthetics is the most serious thing in the world. As the great poet Brodsky said in his noble speech, aesthetics is the mother of ethics. And have a look at what Brodsky wrote in his essay, Flight to Byzantium. If he would have written that today, not only would he have not received his Nobel Prize, he would have been jailed. Got ya. And still Trump's first 2 weeks, your opinion. Brilliant, marvelous. Deserves to be in the Guinness Book of World Records. And those who don't like it. Guys, listen, from childhood, you and your parents, grandmas and grandpas, have never seen a president that fulfills his promises in general, not to mention in the first days and hours. Have a look. Trump is phenomenal in this sense. I'm amazed. He's a smart guy, and it's clear that he is and will be sabotaged, hated, and I've explained why before. But what can you do? You must understand the main thing. Always in politics, in your personal lives, wherever, think about the alternative. What would happen if it was one and not the other? Clinton, for example. Clinton would have kept all the choking normative acts of the Obama presidency in place that had already been regulating everything to such an extent that you couldn't breathe. Neither in the administration, nor in business, the economy, nowhere. She would have kept all those acts or would have increased them because she's part of the same system in almost the same administration. Next, Clinton would have continued funding the Palestinians for there to be even more explosions of Israeli cars with children inside. Also, could Clinton have solved the problem of the Crimea and Donbass? Not at all. The problem came about during Clinton and Obama. Would Clinton have solved the problem of ISIS, a terrorist group incredibly banned from Russia? No, ISIS emerged during Clinton and Obama. Nothing would have been solved. The leftists would have only made everything worse. Look at how the leftists in general and Clinton's fans constantly lie. Trump began fulfilling his promises between the inauguration and dancing with his wife in the first hours. A great mind. Clinton's fans didn't fulfill anything. Even your so-called singer Madonna, known by her brand name Madonna. I remember her statements. You can find them online. She promised to give a blowjob to all those who voted for Clinton. Where's the blowjob? Where are those overjoyed? On the other hand, there must have been many really hoping for... Guys, come on, use your head. I know there's plenty of plastic surgery and Botox. She looks quite good from afar, but she's an elderly woman. What if she has implants, and during the blowjob all of this pops out? Imagine yourself running towards the anti-Trump rally and these implants fall out. What will that look like? So, not all dreams should come true. They lie. Lie. So you think that the protests that went on throughout the whole country were because of Madonna not fulfilling her promises? Well, in general, the problem is the lack of mass production of vibrators. All these protests. Trump's got to open a new business. He's got many problems now as president, forced to entrust his business to his family, but maybe his children and wife can possibly open up a company that mass produces vibrators. It would have a great income. And if you throw these things above demonstrations, you'll simply calm all those crazies. What's more, you can even defeat Islamist terror, dropping all those vibrators on ISIS and other terrorist organizations. But this must all be metaphysically arranged, in the spirit of middle-age postulates. You know, thunder and lightning. It's all possible nowadays, technically speaking. So instead of bombs, you can drop these bags with vibrators. And there must be a sound in the clouds, so they feel it's being sent by a superior being. And then they'll calm down instantly. Because you need to start with physiology and science. You need to know what primates are. Because yes, for centuries, these terrorists did somehow fuck donkeys. So they did that, but as we know, everyone gets weaker. Remember Lermontov's poem? Yes, there were people in our time not like today's kind. It has to do with us all. Everyone gets weaker. People are getting weaker everywhere, and it's obvious that today we can't see film directors like Fellini or Visconti. There are no more tenors except for mastodon Placido Domingo, and there's no one to replace him. The same thing applies to pathetic, primitive things. What's on top is on the bottom. Today they can't even do it with donkeys. That's where the itch comes from. That's why they want to kill people. So we need to drop down vibrators with simple instructions. They can be drawn out on a paper in the form of contemporary art, 2 sticks and that's it. All right, Evgeny, but Obama's administration is already history. But I'd like to ask the following question. In our recent episode on the New Rush World YouTube channel, you mentioned that all that is happening should be viewed in the context of historical processes. Can you please clarify what you meant? It's all very simple. The last 50, 60, 70 years, in the world and the US, there was a kind of slowly creeping capture of the telegraph and telephone by leftists. All forms of mass media, universities, and so on. All this was actually seized. And that which had created our civilization, all of that glorious everyday life, interiors, Hollywood, economics, clean-cut front yards, this all continues to exist, but the noose of Bolshevism and leftism has been thrown on all this. And now a real struggle is going on between the red and white, between Bolshevism, or should I say neo-Bolshevism. This is my personal term. Neo-Bolshevism is taking over the US. These are thugs, criminals, similar to those who came to power in October of 1917 in Russia. And they need to be seriously dealt with the help of National Guard and the army. Police are useless here. You need to use all of your forces. Intellectual forces, publish articles, make your own channels, because this is a life or death struggle. If the neo-Bolsheviks win, there will be another Soviet Union, another totalitarian ideology where you won't be able to say a single word that you feel the need to say. You'll instantly be branded a racist. Totalitarianism will come again, along with socialism, because if you're talented and have a job, they'll take your hard-earned money and use it to sponsor terrorists and savages with savage-like ideological deliriums that make your life a living hell. To sponsor those who for generations sit on welfare and do nothing but walk around in groups of 20 or 30 people with guns and brass knuckles. You know who I'm talking about. They will be sponsored more and more so they can reproduce. And this is what they do very well. Because if you don't have any brains, what else is there to do? Bolshevism is here. I want to use one very simple metaphor. As we are speaking, on my knees I have a splendid album from Nice called La Villa Masséna, meaning the villa of Victor Masséna, grandson of Napoleonic Marshal André Masséna, built in late neoclassical style. And so I was turning the pages and remembered, when did the Belle Époque start? Belle Époque was a wonderful period from 1871 to 1914, the beginning of World War I. So when and with what did this beautiful age start? It began after the Paris Commune was shot at by cannons. Yuri, you seem a bit silent. I'm listening. I'm afraid to interrupt you. Oh, good lad. Be afraid, be afraid. Nevertheless, Evgeny, a natural question. What do we do in this situation? Well, I just answered your question. What to do, what to do. Well, first, our listeners need to start learning English. Because those who have lived for generations in the US, the audience of this given radio station, live comfortably without learning English. And if you want to fight for the aesthetics of capitalism against the left and neo-Bolsheviks, you need English. Second, how to wage this battle. How to fight off the propaganda. One thing you don't do is admire the freedoms of the United States, but stand up for a neo-Soviet regime in Russia. Supporting Putinism in Russia, which is a historical hell and a zigzag of history, should be viewed as a mini-catastrophe which by no means should be supported. If you do this, you'll automatically knock the stool from under the legs of those who say, "Oh, you support Putin." Don't support him. Next, if some walking clitoris begins to scream in your face, "You're a racist, you're a racist," explain to them clearly and distinctly, Islamism is not a race. By the way, Arabs are Caucasian. Next, keep the higher ground. It's a field of battle. Lose the higher ground, lose the battle. Be like Napoleon. Speak out first. Say first, "You're the racist." You see a clitoris walking, say, "You're the racist." Because you think that only this religion and only these people on welfare are good and the lives of others shouldn't be protected. Right off the bat. Next, if you see a feminist walking down the street who obviously hit her head against a pole when she was born, you do the following. You present her with a printed and laminated photograph of chopped off heads of women of you know what kind of most peaceful religion. Laminated beforehand. And while she's squirming in agony like those, what are they called? Like vampires who have seen the light. So these are the methods you must use. And always use the right words. Totalitarianism, because that's what you call the absence of free speech. Evgeny, I must apologize. Let's take a small commercial break, after which we'll continue. Before the commercial break, I'd like to mention our listeners that live in the Chicago area. The world's best listeners. Well, your speech about learning English. It's true that not all of our listeners know English. But the vast majority of our listeners do know English, unlike the Russians of Brighton Beach. Well, may they all listen to Stephen Fry and learn true English.
We are continuing our program. I'll remind you that here we have Yuri Gimmelfarb and Evgeny Ponasenkov. Gentlemen, please.
By the way, Evgeny, you correctly noted that thanks to the leftists, even in the apparently free realm of the internet, they've started to block absolutely innocent things. But it was thanks to the internet that your ideas can be heard in all the corners of the world. That's just remarkable. I fear the day when we will lose even this resource. As we speak, many are writing in my Facebook and our channel's email, people from many different countries and nations. I just wanted you to know. Well, Yuri, this indeed is very nice to hear. And I do indeed get hundreds of emails and messages from people and journalists that I know who forward me other people's messages. What's important is the attitudes and support of concrete individuals. You know, not countries, diplomacy, or even the major themes we discuss, no. What matters, what really matters, is the attitudes of concrete individuals who manage to hear each other in this vast, cold universe. And it's amazing how from different places, like just today, I got messages from France, from Poland, the US, from Kazakhstan, even, and this is hard to believe, but from Dagestan. People of different ages, nations, and ethnic backgrounds all write. But they all, and this can be explained scientifically by similar morphological structure of the brain, as Professor Savelyev correctly puts it. In one way or another, all of them were shaped by European culture and values. They read the same books, saw the same films, admired the same things, and they severely dislike, all the negative things going on in their countries. They understand that there exists a kind of uniform way of life which gave us all of this civilization, including Skype, which we're currently using. So this whole aesthetic, and I'm very grateful and happy that this is possible. I lost my train of thought. By the way, Alex Navalny was once again convicted and put on probation. Returning to Trump and the visas. Navalny was for visas with the Middle Asian republics and countries, the former Soviet countries, and I fully support these measures. Why? Why do we need as many visas and regulations as possible? Because then we'll be able to prevent racism, nationalism, and negative reactions. When all we see is a random crowd, and usually a crowd is predominantly marginalized, as a result, you of course have acts of terror, crime, theft, me no speak English, unsanitary conditions, illnesses, and so on. When we have visas, the most intelligent and worthy people from all nations of the world arrive, and this is wonderful. I'm delighted when I see how in all those Asian republics in Dagestan as well, I see young people with a European mindset that write, well, the future should be theirs. I won't say that it will be theirs because they are seriously deterred by the context they are in and the ballast of I won't say who. Just as in Russia, we also have this thing weighing us down. You have it in the US with those who are against Trump. It exists everywhere. So we need to help and support the image of these best individuals and explain to everyone that only in such a situation will we not see any racism and nationalism in the negative sense of the word. You mentioned aesthetics. You've done it time and time again. Not the first year, not even the first decade, yeah. You say when trying to make sense of any event, aesthetics should come first. Taking into account the recent events in the US, what do you have to say? Well, first of all, the hordes that destroy buildings, smash windows, throw and burn trash cans, and so on, they are definitely anti-aesthetics. Look at their hideous faces. Look at the general displacement of the guys and gals that scream. Look at those wonderful clips where Trump is being sworn in as president, and we see the hysteria of someone's pharynx. It's simple. I'm a physiognomist. I can look at someone's face and everything becomes clear. I was wondering, who was the first judge that started to insult and violate Trump's new law that tries to protect us from terrorists and, by the way, protects the rights of women first? I took one look at his face, you can find it online, and I understood everything. It immediately became clear on the basis of what interests and predispositions he acted upon. Always go from the face. Always look at his origins, his mom and dad. It's important, and there's nothing bad about it. Just imagine, you want to get married, right? You've got to take a look at the parents, because one day, your pretty little girl will turn into exactly what her dad, and especially mom, and more so her grandpa and grandma look like. Take that into account. Especially when you're choosing an administration. Because the president isn't just by himself, he's got a whole administration. And the president is also his wife. Take a look at their wives. Imagine if every living day, several feet from you and then several inches from you, you have this... And when you're young, you need to kiss parts of the jawbone and that which grows up from the ass. That's one case. And if you have something like Melania, that's another case. And take a look at Donald when he was 30. All the gays of America should just fall in love with him. And he's in great shape now, by the way. Half a year ago, even though I supported him before, I didn't even know how old he was. Wonderful, emotional, humorous, stylish. And the equally wonderful Milo Yiannopoulos supports him, who is a wonderful, brilliant political writer and a smart guy who fights leftist fascism. He's constantly insulted and right now needs all the support he can get. A brilliant gay man. I think they'd make a great pair, Milo and Trump. You know what? Trump could, in one simple action, show all these leftists their proper place. You see, back in the day, Napoleon, to get an heir, was forced to leave Josephine, marry Marie-Louise, have a son, and all this was needed for the interests of the state. Trump is now a man of the state. He can no longer do everything he wants. So he can explain the political necessity, have a tete-a-tete talk with Melania, and temporarily formalize a relationship with Milo Yiannopoulos. Such a move would instantly take the stool from under all those clitorises who are ready to hang. He needs unexpected moves. But they'll accuse him of racism. Well, of course they will. Oh, because he didn't marry a black man, but a white man. Outrageous. Because Milo is half Greek and half English, as you know. Yeah, you're right. So we're going to need... But wait. That's going to seem too obvious. Now we're looking for an African American. Why bother, though, when in fact, if how he conducts himself, his talks, his publications, his gestures... You know, that's your Soviet socialist side speaking. You always need to find some Bangladeshi or some Somalian, label him as a world-renowned poet or fighter for human rights, a great supporter of world peace and friendship of nations. Even in my time, I remember how in Moscow State University there was no longer any Soviet Union, it was long dead, but there were always special quotas for people from provinces of our far-fetched motherland. They can't even connect two words together. Don't know that I before the E except after the C. Why all this unnaturalness? This is what I call racism. Let things be objective. Why is it that today, in Paris, London, Brussels, and the US, if an African insults everyone around him, no one touches him, afraid to be accused of racism? That is racism. He has the same right as a white person to be punished. It's the other side of racism. Not to mention your Black Lives Matter, or whatever you call that. It's natural black racism. All lives should matter, not only those of blacks. And just as one student cried out that not just black lives matter, but all lives matter, she was expelled. That's what I call fascism, leftist fascism.
I remember how in the Soviet times, the first secretary of the local communist organization was required to be the same ethnic background as the republic, and only the second secretary was chosen according to skill level and knowledge. I remember this very clearly. It's all understood. That's political correctness. Political correctness started in the rotten Soviet Union. It's where this atrocity came from. But you must understand, there are two forms of political correctness. One, when there's a genius violinist walking down the street and a marginalized person has no right to insult him because otherwise he'd be jailed. And the other form is when there's a walking piece of dog shit that just smashes store windows and you can't do anything about it. That's not political correctness. Don't mix the two. The worst thing that can happen is the substitution of concepts. The substitution of capitalism with socialism, freedom of speech with a new form of totalitarianism. I can't agree more. You know, when Yuri mentioned the Soviet Party secretaries, I thought of what we here in America call affirmative action, or so-called positive discrimination, when ethnic minorities are granted special conditions. Which, from an evolutionary standpoint, and I say this as an anthropologist, dilute, weaken, and do not allow for an individual to develop and evolve in a competitive struggle. They grow only more stupid. They were already on a low stage of development, and it'll be only worse. They will only degrade, don't you understand? It's like bed sores. If you lie in bed sick and don't move, you'll get a bed sore and die. The same thing here, except you'll be disturbing everyone else. I think that ultimately there should be only one privilege, only the professionals, only for brains. And forget the phrase, oh, they didn't get a chance to. Everyone has long had a chance to get an education, and then the internet appeared. But it turns out no one needs textbooks on physics and chemistry. Nobody needs Maria Callas. Just as they had walked in the streets in dirty and unwashed crowds, so they still do. No one needs your information. If evolution didn't happen, so what? It didn't happen. What about before that? What about several centuries ago? Where's all their architecture, their ships, their navigation? Where's their compass? Do they navigate with moss? Some can't even do that. And why navigate if you can stay under a palm tree? Just now in one of our Facebook groups, the bleeding hearts of one of our liberals raised the question about the fact that in Donald Trump's cabinet, there doesn't seem to be a single Latin American. Excuse me, but what does the person's nationality or ethnic background have to do with his brain activity? Yeah, what kind of nationalism is this? This is what I call nationalism, friggin' nationalism. Not to mention the fact that America was formed by Europeans. The Constitution was written by Europeans. The word capital it's a Roman word, the place where Trump's inauguration took place. New England, New York. This has nothing to do with, please, come visit, live here, work, win, conquer all sorts of penance, get rich. But nothing artificial. Let's not invent anything. They say a nation of migrants. Yes, it's a nation of migrants, but migrants from where? European migrants. Who gave us the Constitution? Who invented absolutely everything? Who gave us this civilization? Where Europeans arrived, there was civilization. Look at Australia. What's going on there? Take a look at the local population. What did they build? The Europeans came and built everything in 2 days. Well, let's take another final commercial break, after which I have several more questions. We're back in Yuri Gimmelfarb's program. Gentlemen, please. Evgeny, I can be mistaken, but I believe that you are the only one who... Wait, you can stop your phrase right there, and you won't be mistaken. So, as far as I know, you were the only member of the Russian opposition who had supported Trump from the first days of his election campaign. I observed and I was amazed how you managed to withstand attacks from within your own ranks, from those against Putin, from leftists, and it was quite a serious attack, I must say. My question is, how is it to withstand such an attack? Did you part with any of your virtual friends? Well, first of all, today's conversation is opening up a whole new world to me. For starters, I found out that Russia has an opposition. Second, of course, if a so-called friend on Facebook or elsewhere blurted out something, I just throw him out to the garbage. And when recently Trump refused to cancel any sanctions against Putin and supported NATO, some of these degenerates came back saying, "Oh, we were mistaken, you were right." You must remember there are also those who are quiet and don't accept their own mistakes and the correctness of what I'm saying. Anyway, those who come back, I don't accept. I never accept anyone back into my personal or virtual life. Because just imagine, you threw a thing out, it was lying there, rotting in the dirt, and you want to take this thing into your hands and mouth. How is that? I repeat, never let people back into private and Facebook life, no matter what they say and do. Speaking of the attacks, they're a bit overrated because they're strong only in numbers. They are, these leftists, unintellectual creatures, primitive and uneducated, who don't know their history and therefore cannot understand the historical significance and necessity of Trump's presidency. They don't get that it was Obama and his leftist administration who brought Trump to power in the first place. If it wasn't for the 8 years of this leftist hell, such a bright, emotional, and odious individual as Trump would never have been elected. They don't understand that if it wasn't for Clinton's contacts with the Saudis, and it's not important how this information turned up, it's just good that it did, she might have gotten a few more percent. Though I think that she would have lost still, because people have had it with the omnipresent rudeness of the press, who believed it could create and destroy anyone. The media thought it was somebody, and it was nothing. Who are these journalists? I don't mean you, an educated man, but in general. These are people who don't understand a thing about anything. They don't have any useful professions. Their task is to ask others, and they're trying to express their own opinion. An opinion requires intellect. An opinion requires arguments. Not all opinions are opinions. The majority of opinions are simply fails, and so on. But yes, there is a struggle, and fortunately, there are a few channels like TV Rain and Echo of Moscow Radio who are not in favor of Putin. Even though Echo is owned by Gazprom Media and TV Rain was opened by President Medvedev and his advisor Vladislav Surkov, TV Rain is turned into a contaminated can of amateurs. On Echo, there's only one brilliant Latina, and who else? Who's alone? What can they do? They inform of acts of terror every day about crimes and say nothing of how to solve these crimes. You must understand that when in the US, for example, they begin to insult Trump, declare him as a racist and so on, first of all ask yourself, instantly stop them dead in their tracks. Why don't you personally insult a terrorist? There's a large amount of Islamist terrorists out there. They even have their own Facebook accounts. Can you imagine that? They all have that. And the one who drove over 100 people in Nice, this animal brute, also had a Facebook account where he posted his religious extremist delirium. And this guy still has a family. And the Kouachi brothers, who committed terrorist acts in France, also have a family. And all of these savages live on welfare. They are being fed by those whose families died in these attacks. Why don't you just find them and say, "Have you no shame to gorge?" Well, you can't say this because you're too thin-skinned. You could say just, "Are you not ashamed to eat at the expense of those who your brother, father, and husband had murdered?" Why do you insult Trump and not ask of them? Of course, you're fearful brutes. That's easier. It's easier to insult and bother a decent person like me, but to solve the problem with these savages, you can't, because you were born idiots. And if Trump is trying to solve this problem, you interfere. This is a genuine crime. To interfere with one's fight against terrorism is a crime. He didn't create terrorism.
It's not his fault terrorists are now here and have almost established their own nation. How do we deal with all this? He wasn't the one who let KGB agents into Ukraine. This was not done on his watch. Of course now it will be long and hard. Reagan fought the Soviet Union for years, by the way. And all you want is quick results. Oh, what is he going to do in terms of his relationship with Putin? Reagan achieved great things and is now worshipped among liberals. But did he achieve the fall of the Soviet Union during his presidency? No, it happened 2 to 3 years ago after his term had ended. It all took time and an ally like Thatcher. Unfortunately, when you have a large amount of degenerates fiddling around with such ideas, it's not an easy situation. They say, New World Order, because if it did exist, we wouldn't have all this hell that we see around us. Yeah. And one more important nuance. Look at the statistics. I believe statistics are crucial for intellectual conclusions. How many businessmen were in the administration of the last U.S. presidents? It turns out that over time, it was around 50%, with a minimum of 42%. Only one dumbhead Obama had 8% of businessmen in his administration. Can you imagine that? It's crazy. I just can't believe it. It means to bury the economy and the country with it. Reagan had 56%, and it's usually around 50%, and Obama had 8%. That's why they voted for Trump, who on his second and third day met with the representatives of business in the country. And he was right, because business is the foundation of society. If there's an economy and finance, there is life. No economy, no life. Like in the USSR. When did the Renaissance start? When the Medici had an effective monetary policy. Evgeny, our radio program is coming to an end, so we thank you for such an interesting conversation. Hope to see you again. And so, friends, we were listening to the answers of Evgeny Ponasenkov. Goodbye. Audio recorded at Rec Square Studios, Moscow.